The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine green lawns of Ascot Racecourse, where thousands of racegoers had gathered with bated breath. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the familiar sound of hoofbeats on the cobblestone approach signaled something extraordinary. After months of uncertainty, health concerns, and public speculation about the monarchy's future, Britain's longest-reigning monarch was about to make one of her most anticipated appearances of the year. The crowd fell silent as the distinctive royal carriage appeared in the distance, its wheels clicking rhythmically against the ancient stones. Inside sat a figure who had weathered nearly 7 decades of public service, personal loss, and national transformation. At 96 years old, Queen Elizabeth II was returning to the event that had defined her passion for decades, Royal Ascot, where her love for horses and racing had flourished since childhood. But this wasn't just any return. The air was electric with emotion as thousands of people, from aristocrats in their finest morning dress to ordinary citizens who had traveled from across the kingdom, prepared to witness what many believed might be one of the Queen's final public appearances at her beloved racecourse. The question that hung in everyone's mind was simple yet profound. How would the nation's grandmother, frail but determined, be received by her people after such a long absence? As the carriage drew closer, the silence broke into something unprecedented, a roar of affection that seemed to rise from the very soul of Britain itself. The journey to this momentous day had begun months earlier in the private chambers of Windsor Castle, where Queen Elizabeth II sat in her favorite armchair, surrounded by the familiar comfort of her corgis and the gentle afternoon light filtering through ancient windows. Her doctors had been cautious, her family protective, and the press relentless in their speculation about her health. The previous year had taken its toll on the monarch. The loss of Prince Philip, her husband of 73 years, had left a void that seemed to age her overnight. Royal Ascot had always been more than just a horse racing event for the Queen. It was a tradition that connected her to her father, King George VI, who had first taken her to the races as a young princess. Those early memories of standing beside him in the royal box, watching the thunderous gallop of thoroughbreds across the emerald turf, had sparked a lifelong passion that would outlast wars, political upheavals, and personal tragedies. The Queen's love affair with horses began in childhood when she received her first pony, a Shetland named Peggy. From that moment, her connection to these magnificent animals became the thread that wove through her entire life. Even as she ascended to the throne at the tender age of 25, her devotion to breeding, racing, and caring for horses remained constant. Royal Ascot represented the pinnacle of her equestrian world, where her personal passion intersected with her royal duties in perfect harmony. As 2022 approached, however, doubt clouded the horizon. The Queen's mobility issues had become increasingly apparent to those close to her. The long walks from the castle to the carriage, the hours of standing and socializing, the sheer physical demands of a full day at the races, all seemed insurmountable challenges for a woman approaching her 97th birthday. Her private secretary, a man who had served the royal household for over 2 decades, found himself in the delicate position of managing expectations while protecting his sovereign's dignity. Phone calls between Buckingham Palace and the British Racing Authority became frequent as they discussed contingency plans, modified schedules, and alternative arrangements that might allow the Queen to participate in some capacity. The racing world held its collective breath. Trainers who had spent years hoping to present their horses to the Queen wondered if they would ever have another opportunity. Jockeys who had dreamed of winning in the royal colors questioned whether their monarch would be present to witness their potential triumph. The entire British racing community understood that they might be approaching the end of an era. Meanwhile, in the stables across Britain, preparations continued regardless of uncertainty. The Queen's own horses, bred and trained with meticulous care at the royal studs, were being prepared for competition. Her racing manager, a trusted advisor who had worked with the royal stable for over 3 decades, continued the daily routine of training schedules and race selections, hoping against hope that his employer would be well enough to see her beloved horses compete. The breeding program that the Queen had developed over decades represented one of the most successful private racing operations in British history. Her horses had won countless races, including classics that most owners only dream of achieving. Each victory had brought her genuine joy, the kind of pure happiness that transcended royal protocol and revealed the passionate horsewoman beneath the crown. In the weeks leading up to Ascot, subtle preparations began at the racecourse itself. The royal box underwent careful inspection and minor modifications to ensure maximum comfort and accessibility. The traditional route for the royal procession was examined for any potential difficulties, while security personnel developed multiple contingency plans for various scenarios. The Queen's dressmaker, a woman who had created royal outfits for over 2 decades, worked quietly on what might become one of the most photographed ensembles in recent royal history. Every detail was considered, from the practicality of the fabric to the symbolic significance of the colors chosen. The hat, a crucial element of any Ascot appearance, was designed to provide both style and comfort for what could be a lengthy outdoor event. As the date approached, members of the royal family began their own preparations. Prince Charles, now King Charles III, coordinated his schedule to ensure he could accompany his mother if she chose to attend. Princess, and herself an accomplished equestrian and former Olympic competitor, made herself available to provide support and companionship for the outing. The racing press began their speculation in earnest. Would this be the Queen's farewell to Ascot? How would she travel to the course? Would she be able to participate in the traditional carriage procession that had delighted crowds for decades? Each question sparked countless articles and expert opinions, but no one outside the inner circle of the royal household knew the truth. Public interest reached fever pitch as Royal Ascot Week approached. Ticket sales for the event had already been strong, but the possibility of witnessing what might be the Queen's final appearance at her favorite sporting venue drove demand to unprecedented levels. Hotels in the surrounding area reported full bookings, while restaurants prepared for crowds larger than they had seen in years. The Queen's own decision-making process remained intensely private. Those closest to her reported that she was determined to attend if physically possible, but also realistic about her limitations. Daily assessments of her energy levels and mobility became part of the routine at Windsor Castle, with doctors and advisors providing honest evaluations of what would be feasible. The emotional weight of the decision extended beyond personal considerations. The Queen understood that her presence at Royal Ascot carried symbolic importance for the racing industry, for British traditions, and for the thousands of people who had planned their attendance around the possibility of seeing her. Yet she also recognized the need to protect herself from overexertion and potential embarrassment if her health proved inadequate for the demands of the event. Racing officials worked behind the scenes to ensure that whatever level of participation the Queen chose, it would be executed flawlessly. Alternative viewing areas were prepared, modified transportation options were arranged, and staff were briefed on various scenarios that might unfold. The goal was to honor the Queen's wishes while maintaining the dignity and grandeur associated with royal participation in the event. As the final week before Royal Ascot arrived, tension and anticipation reached their peak. The Queen's schedule was kept deliberately light, with all non-essential commitments postponed or canceled to preserve her energy for the potential racecourse visit. The decision would ultimately be made on the morning of the event itself, based on how she felt and what her medical advisors recommended. The entire racing world waited with bated breath, understanding that they stood on the threshold of history. Whether the Queen appeared or not, this Royal Ascot would be remembered as a pivotal moment, either as a triumphant return or as the end of one of the most enduring partnerships between monarch and sport in British history. The morning of Tuesday, June 14th, 2022, dawned clear and bright over Windsor Castle. In the private apartments of the Queen, a careful routine unfolded that would determine whether one of the most anticipated royal appearances in recent memory would actually take place. Her personal physician arrived early, conducting a thorough but gentle assessment of her condition, checking her mobility, energy levels, and overall readiness for what would undoubtedly be a demanding day. The Queen herself had awakened with a sense of determination that surprised even her closest attendants. Despite the previous months of careful consideration and medical advice, something deep within her had resolved that this day would not pass without her presence at the racecourse, where she had experienced some of her greatest joys. The woman who had never shied away from duty, even when it came at personal cost, was not prepared to let age or infirmity keep her from one final appearance at her beloved royal Ascot. Her dresser, a woman who had served the royal household for over 15 years, approached the morning's preparations with particular care. The outfit that had been designed weeks earlier hung ready, an elegant ensemble in royal blue, chosen not only for its flattering qualities but for its comfort and practicality. The matching hat, adorned with delicate flowers and featuring a subtle brim that would provide both sun protection and camera-friendly angles, awaited its moment to crown what might become an historic ensemble. Meanwhile, at Ascot Racecourse itself, final preparations were reaching their crescendo. The groundskeeping staff had worked through the early morning hours, ensuring that every blade of grass in the royal enclosure was perfectly manicured, every flower bed immaculately maintained. The famous royal Ascot atmosphere was already building as early arrivals made their way through the gates, many dressed in the traditional morning suits and elaborate hats that had become synonymous with the event. Word of the Queen's possible attendance had spread through the racing community like wildfire. Trainers arrived early to check on their horses one final time, hoping that their carefully prepared runners might have the honor of performing before their sovereign. Jockeys went through their pre-race routines with added attention to detail, knowing that today might offer the chance to ride before the most knowledgeable and passionate racing enthusiast in the kingdom. The royal carriage, a magnificent vehicle that had transported monarchs to Ascot for over a century, underwent its final inspection. The horses selected to pull the carriage were groomed to perfection, their coats gleaming in the morning sun. The coachmen and footmen, resplendent in their royal livery, rehearsed their timing one last time, ensuring that if called upon, they would deliver a procession worthy of the occasion. Back at Windsor Castle, the decision-making process continued in the Queen's private sitting room. Her racing manager had arrived with the latest updates on her horses that were scheduled to run during the week. 3 of her thoroughbreds were entered in various races, each representing years of careful breeding and training. The possibility of missing their performances weighed heavily on her mind, as these horses carried not just her colors, but her lifetime of passion for the sport. Prince Charles, accompanied by Camilla, arrived at the castle to offer support and companionship for the potential journey. Their presence provided both emotional comfort and practical assistance, as they could help ensure that the Queen's energy was conserved for the most important moments of the day. The family dynamic, often scrutinized by the public, showed its most genuine face in these private moments of care and consideration. The Queen's private secretary maintained constant communication with Ascot officials, updating them on the evolving situation while protecting the family's privacy. Contingency plans that had been developed over previous weeks were refined and adjusted, ensuring that whatever decision was made, it could be implemented smoothly and with appropriate dignity. As the morning progressed, crowds began arriving at Ascot in earnest. The anticipation was palpable among racegoers who had purchased tickets, hoping for the possibility of witnessing royal history. Many had traveled from across Britain and beyond, understanding instinctively that this might represent their last opportunity to see the Queen at her favorite sporting venue. The atmosphere was charged with a mixture of excitement and poignancy that made this day unlike any other in recent memory. The traditional royal Ascot pageantry was proceeding regardless of the uncertainty surrounding the Queen's attendance. The military band was in position, their instruments gleaming in the sunshine as they prepared to play the national anthem and other ceremonial music. The royal box had been prepared with meticulous attention to every detail, from the fresh flowers to the comfortable seating arrangements that would accommodate the Queen's needs if she chose to attend. Racing officials found themselves managing an unprecedented level of media attention. Photographers and television crews from around the world had positioned themselves strategically, hoping to capture what could become one of the most significant royal photographs of the era. The balance between respecting the Queen's privacy and documenting this potentially historic moment required careful coordination and sensitivity. At approximately 11 o'clock, a decision was reached. After careful consultation with her doctors, discussions with her family, and honest self-assessment of her capabilities, Queen Elizabeth II determined that she would indeed attend Royal Ascot. The announcement was made quietly to the necessary officials, setting in motion a carefully orchestrated plan that had been months in the making. The Queen's preparation for departure took on a ceremonial quality of its own. Each element of her outfit was donned with particular care, from the comfortable but elegant shoes chosen for their practicality to the jewelry selected for its personal significance. The handbag, an accessory that had become almost as iconic as the crown itself, was prepared with the essential items she would need for the day ahead. The journey from Windsor Castle to Ascot, a distance of just a few miles, took on enormous significance. The Queen's decision to travel by car rather than the traditional carriage was made for comfort and accessibility, but it in no way diminished the importance of the moment. As the royal vehicle pulled away from the castle, it carried with it the hopes and expectations of a nation that had been waiting to see their monarch at her happiest. The route to Ascot was lined with well-wishers who had gathered in hopes of catching a glimpse of the Queen during her journey. Word of her attendance had begun to spread, creating an impromptu celebration along the roadways. Local police managed the crowds with good humor and understanding, recognizing the special nature of the occasion and the genuine affection that drove people to wait hours for a momentary royal sighting. At Ascot itself, the news of the Queen's confirmed attendance spread through the crowd like electricity. The atmosphere shifted from hopeful anticipation to joyful excitement as people realized they would indeed witness history in the making. Hat brims were adjusted, cameras were prepared, and thousands of people positioned themselves for the best possible view of what promised to be an unforgettable royal entrance. The culmination of months of uncertainty, careful planning, and heartfelt desire was about to unfold on the hallowed turf of Royal Ascot. The Queen, showing the same determination that had characterized her entire reign, was returning to the place where her personal passion and royal duty had always found their most perfect expression. The royal car approached the gates of Ascot Racecourse at precisely 1:30 in the afternoon, its arrival time to coincide with the traditional royal procession that had become one of the most beloved traditions in British racing. As the vehicle turned into the racecourse grounds, a ripple of excitement spread through the assembled crowd like wildfire. Mobile phones emerged from pockets and handbags as people prepared to capture what they instinctively knew would be a moment of extraordinary historical significance. Inside the car, Queen Elizabeth II sat with the composed dignity that had characterized her public appearances for over 7 decades. Her royal blue ensemble was perfectly coordinated, from the elegant hat that sat at just the right angle to catch the afternoon light, to the pearl necklace that had been a gift from her late father. Her hands, which had signed countless state documents and greeted millions of people throughout her reign, held a small bouquet of flowers that had been specially prepared for the occasion. The decision had been made to forego the traditional horse-drawn carriage procession, a departure from protocol that everyone understood was necessary given the Queen's age and mobility considerations. However, this modification in no way diminished the grandeur of her arrival. If anything, it added an element of poignancy that touched the hearts of everyone present. Here was a woman who had given her entire adult life to public service, making one final effort to be present at the event that meant more to her personally than perhaps any other. As the car came to a stop near the entrance to the royal enclosure, a team of carefully chosen attendants moved into position with practiced efficiency. Every detail of the Queen's exit from the vehicle had been choreographed to ensure her comfort and safety while maintaining the dignity befitting a monarch. The door was opened by a footman whose family had served the royal household for 3 generations, a man who understood the profound honor of assisting his sovereign on this momentous day. The moment Queen Elizabeth II stepped onto the pathway leading to the royal box will forever be etched in the memories of those present. Despite her age and the walking stick that now assisted her mobility, she carried herself with unmistakable regal bearing. Her smile, genuine and warm, spread across her face as she took in the familiar sights and sounds of Royal Ascot. The thunderous applause that erupted from the crowd was unlike anything heard at the racecourse in living memory. The ovation began slowly, with a few individuals recognizing the significance of what they were witnessing. But within seconds, it had grown into a powerful wave of sound that seemed to roll across the entire racecourse. From the exclusive royal enclosure to the more casual public areas, every person present understood they were part of something extraordinary. Hats were removed in respect, hands clapped with enthusiasm, and voices joined together in cheers that echoed across the ancient grounds. What made this reception so remarkable was not just its volume, but its emotional content. This was not the polite applause typically accorded to royal appearances. This was something deeper, more personal, and infinitely more meaningful. These were the people of Britain expressing their genuine affection for a woman who had dedicated her life to serving them, who had shared their joys and sorrows through decades of triumph and tragedy. Among the crowd were racing enthusiasts who had followed the Queen's horses for years, watching with admiration as her breeding program produced champion after champion. There were ordinary citizens who had traveled hundreds of miles for the chance to be present at what they suspected might be their last opportunity to see their monarch in person. There were foreign visitors who recognized they were witnessing a moment of living history, when the personal and the ceremonial merged into something truly extraordinary. The Queen's progress toward the royal box was deliberately slow, allowing her to acknowledge the crowd and for them to fully appreciate her presence. Her walking stick, rather than being a sign of frailty, somehow enhanced her dignity. Each step represented a triumph of will over the inevitable limitations of age, a demonstration of the same determination that had carried her through nearly 70 years of reigning. Prince Charles and Camilla flanked her, their presence providing both physical support and emotional comfort. The family unit that the public saw in this moment was stripped of all pretense and formality. This was a son supporting his elderly mother, a daughter-in-law offering gentle assistance, a family sharing a moment of profound significance. The future king and queen consort understood that they were part of something that transcended their individual roles. As the queen reached the steps leading to the royal box, another wave of applause erupted from the crowd. The sound engineer responsible for the public address system later reported that the noise levels reached unprecedented peaks, louder even than the cheers that typically greeted the finish of the most exciting races. This was the sound of a nation expressing its love and gratitude to a woman who had become the living embodiment of continuity and service. The royal box itself had been prepared with meticulous attention to the Queen's comfort and needs. A specially selected chair provided optimal support while maintaining the dignity appropriate for a monarch. The positioning allowed her perfect views of both the racing action and the crowd, enabling her to enjoy both the sport she loved and the people who had come to honor her presence. The first race of the afternoon took on special significance with the Queen's attendance confirmed. Horses that might otherwise have been competing for prize money and prestige were now running before the most knowledgeable racing expert in the kingdom. Trainers felt the added pressure and excitement of presenting their horses before someone whose understanding of thoroughbred racing was legendary throughout the industry. When the Queen's own horse entered the parade ring for the second race, the emotion in the air became almost tangible. This was not just any racehorse, but an animal bred and trained under the direct supervision of the monarch herself. The jockey wearing the royal colors carried the hopes not just of winning the race, but of providing the Queen with the kind of sporting joy that had sustained her throughout her long life. The television coverage of the event captured every nuance of the Queen's reactions as she watched the racing unfold. Her genuine engagement with the sport was evident in her expressions, her body language, and her conversations with those around her. This was not a duty to be endured, but a passion to be savored, possibly for the final time in this particular setting. Racing commentators, typically focused on the horses and their performances, found themselves moved to comment on the extraordinary atmosphere created by the Queen's presence. The usual professional distance of sports broadcasting gave way to more personal observations about what this moment meant, not just for racing, but for the nation as a whole. The afternoon progressed with a magical quality that no one present would ever forget. Each race seemed more significant, each cheer more heartfelt, each moment more precious because of a knowledge that this might be the last time the Queen would grace Royal Ascot with her presence. The combination of sporting excellence and royal tradition reached a perfect crescendo that afternoon, creating memories that would last lifetimes. The afternoon sun reached its peak as Queen Elizabeth II settled into her viewing position in the royal box, her presence transforming the entire atmosphere of Royal Ascot into something approaching the sacred. Every detail of her engagement with the racing became a study in the perfect fusion of personal passion and royal dignity. Her racing card, marked with her own handwriting as she studied the form of each competitor, represented decades of accumulated knowledge about bloodlines, training methods, and the subtle arts of handicapping that few people in the world could match. The Queen's method of watching races was a masterclass in focused attention. Unlike casual spectators who might be distracted by conversation or pageantry, she followed each horse from the moment they appeared on the course until they crossed the finish line. Her binoculars, a pair she had owned for over 30 years, were raised with practiced precision as she tracked the movement of the field. Those close enough to observe her could see her lips moving slightly as she identified individual horses and assessed their performance throughout each race. When her own horse, a magnificent bay colt named Reach for the Moon, was led into the parade ring for the Hardwicke Stakes, the Queen's demeanor shifted into an even more intense level of concentration. This was not merely spectating, but participating in the most personal way possible. The horse represented years of careful breeding decisions, training investments, and the kind of patient long-term planning that had made her one of the most respected owner-breeders in British racing. The parade ring presentation became a moment of profound connection between monarch and horse. Despite the crowds and cameras surrounding her, the Queen's attention was entirely focused on her runner. She observed his movement, his temperament, his readiness for the challenge ahead with the experienced eye of someone who had been evaluating horses since before most people present had been born. Her racing manager provided quiet updates on the horse's condition and prospects, but it was clear that her own assessment was the one that mattered most. The jockey wearing the royal purple and gold silks approached the royal box for final instructions, a tradition that carried extra weight on this particular afternoon. The conversation between sovereign and jockey was brief but intense, covering tactical considerations that had been discussed and refined over previous days. This was not ceremonial consultation, but serious racing strategy being finalized at the highest level of the sport. As Reach for the Moon made his way to the starting gate, the entire racecourse seemed to hold its collective breath. The possibility of the Queen's horse winning on her return to Ascot carried symbolic weight that transcended normal sporting competition. Racing fans who had never particularly cared about royal results found themselves genuinely hoping for a fairy tale conclusion to an already magical day. The start of the Hardwicke Stakes was met with a level of attention usually reserved for classic races or championship events. The Queen's focus was absolute as she tracked her horse through the early stages of the mile and a half contest. Reach for the Moon settled well in the field, positioned perfectly for a late challenge in the style that had become associated with many successful royal runners over the decades. As the field rounded the final bend and approached the straight, the Queen's horse began to make his move. The jockey, responding to weeks of careful planning and the immediate demands of the race, guided Reach for the Moon into a challenging position with just over 2 furlongs to run. The roar from the crowd intensified as people realized they might be witnessing something truly special, a royal winner on the Queen's emotional return to her beloved racecourse. The final furlong unfolded like a perfectly scripted drama. Reach for the Moon, carrying the hopes of his royal owner and the emotional investment of thousands of spectators, battled gamely against strong opposition. The Queen was on her feet now, her usual composed demeanor giving way to the genuine excitement of an owner watching her horse compete for victory in one of the sport's most prestigious venues. In a photo finish that required several minutes of deliberation by the race stewards, Reach for the Moon was declared the winner by the narrowest of margins. The explosion of joy that erupted from the crowd was unlike anything in Royal Ascot's long history. This was not just celebration of a sporting victory, but recognition of a moment that seemed touched by destiny itself. The Queen's reaction to her horse's victory was a study in controlled emotion. While maintaining the dignity expected of a monarch, she allowed herself a moment of pure, unguarded joy that revealed the passionate racing enthusiast beneath the crown. Her smile was radiant as she acknowledged the cheers of the crowd, many of whom were moved to tears by the perfection of the moment. The traditional winners' enclosure ceremony took on extraordinary significance as the Queen made her way down from the royal box to greet her victorious horse. Each step of her journey was accompanied by sustained applause from racegoers who understood they were witnessing history being made. The photograph of her standing beside Reach for the Moon, trophy in hand, and genuine happiness lighting her features would become one of the most cherished royal images of the modern era. The presentation ceremony was conducted with appropriate pomp and circumstance, but the real magic lay in the Queen's obvious delight with her horse's achievement. She spent several minutes talking with the trainer and jockey, asking detailed questions about the race and the horse's performance with the genuine curiosity of someone who truly understood the sport. Her knowledge and engagement impressed even the most experienced racing professionals present. As news of the royal victory spread beyond the racecourse, the story took on a life of its own. Social media exploded with congratulations and emotional responses from people around the world who recognized the symbolic power of the moment. Here was a woman approaching her 97th birthday, achieving sporting success at the venue that had brought her joy for over 7 decades. The remaining races of the afternoon were watched with continuing excitement, but the royal victory had provided the perfect climax to an already extraordinary day. The Queen remained in the royal box for the full program, her energy seemingly renewed by the success of her horse and the warmth of the crowd's reception. Each subsequent race was enjoyed with the satisfied glow of someone who had just experienced one of racing's greatest gifts, the thrill of victory at the highest level. Television commentators struggled to find words adequate to describe what they had witnessed. This was sport transcending its usual boundaries to become something approaching art, where preparation, passion, and pure chance had combined to create a moment of perfect beauty. The racing world had provided its greatest enthusiast with a farewell gift that no script could have improved upon. As the afternoon drew toward its close, the significance of what had transpired became even more apparent. The Queen had not merely attended Royal Ascot. She had conquered it one final time, demonstrating that her passion for racing remained as strong as ever despite the physical challenges of advancing age. The warm ovation she had received upon arrival had been matched and exceeded by the celebration of her sporting triumph. As the final race of the afternoon approached its conclusion, Queen Elizabeth II remained in the royal box, seemingly reluctant to bring this magical day to an end. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the racecourse, creating a golden atmosphere that perfectly matched the mood of celebration and nostalgia that had characterized the entire event. Her victory with Reach for the Moon had provided the perfect crescendo to what many recognized as a farewell performance by Britain's greatest racing enthusiast. The Queen's departure from Royal Ascot was carefully orchestrated to allow maximum interaction with the crowd, while respecting her energy levels and physical limitations. As word spread that she was preparing to leave, thousands of racegoers positioned themselves along her expected route, hoping for one final glimpse of their monarch in this setting that had showcased her at her happiest and most personally engaged. The walk from the royal box to her waiting car became a procession of pure emotion. Every step was accompanied by sustained applause, with many in the crowd moved to tears by the recognition that they had been privileged to witness something truly extraordinary. The Queen acknowledged the ovation with gracious waves and genuine smiles, her obvious pleasure in the day's events radiating to everyone present. Racing officials, many of whom had worked with the Queen for decades, formed an informal guard of honor as she made her way through the royal enclosure. These were people who had seen her through countless victories and defeats, who had witnessed her knowledge and passion for the sport develop and deepen over the years. Their own emotions were clearly visible as they realized they were likely saying farewell to someone who had elevated their profession through her participation and genuine expertise. The trophy presentation for the Hardwick Stakes had concluded with the Queen holding the silver cup won by her horse, but the real prize was the memory of this perfect afternoon. Photographers captured every angle of her joy, understanding that these images would become historic documents of a moment when sport, tradition, and human emotion combined to create something approaching magic. As the Queen reached her car, she paused for a moment to take in the scene one final time. The racecourse that had provided her with so many memorable moments over 7 decades stretched before her, its familiar contours as much a part of her personal landscape as any of her official residences. The crowd continued their appreciation, understanding that they were participating in a moment that would be remembered and discussed for generations to come. The journey back to Windsor Castle was conducted in an atmosphere of quiet satisfaction and reflection. The Queen had achieved something remarkable, not just attending Royal Ascot despite her physical challenges, but winning one of the day's most prestigious races in the process. The combination of personal triumph and public celebration had created the kind of perfect conclusion that fiction writers would hesitate to attempt. News of the Queen's successful return to Royal Ascot and her horse's victory spread around the world within hours. International media recognized the story as something that transcended typical royal coverage, representing instead a human narrative of passion, determination, and the triumph of spirit over physical limitation. The images of her joy at her horse's victory became some of the most widely shared royal photographs in recent memory. The racing industry itself was transformed by the day's events. Trainers, jockeys, and racing officials who had been present felt they had participated in something that elevated their sport to its highest possible level. The Queen's knowledge, passion, and genuine engagement had reminded everyone why horse racing was called the sport of kings and why her participation had brought such credibility and prestige to British racing for over 70 years. In the days that followed, tributes poured in from racing personalities around the world. Champion jockeys who had ridden for the Queen shared memories of her detailed knowledge and genuine care for both horses and people. Trainers recalled conversations that demonstrated her deep understanding of every aspect of the sport, from breeding theories to training methods to the psychology of competition. The success of Reach for the Moon became a symbol that extended far beyond racing. Here was proof that dedication, patience, and genuine expertise could still triumph in an age often characterized by instant gratification and superficial knowledge. The Queen's breeding program, developed over decades of careful study and investment, had produced a champion at precisely the moment when such success carried maximum emotional weight. Royal Ascot 2022 entered the history books as one of the most emotionally charged and memorable racing events ever staged. The combination of the Queen's courageous return, the warmth of the crowd's reception, and the fairy tale victory of her horse created a narrative that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Yet those present knew they had witnessed genuine magic, the kind that occurs when preparation meets opportunity in the presence of someone truly extraordinary. The Queen's final Royal Ascot appearance became a template for how to conclude a career with dignity, grace, and triumph. At 96 years old, she had demonstrated that passion and expertise could overcome physical limitations, that genuine love for a sport could transcend the normal boundaries of age and circumstance. Her presence had elevated everyone present, from the most casual spectator to the most experienced racing professional. The legacy of that afternoon extended far beyond the immediate participants. Young people watching the coverage were inspired by the example of someone who had pursued their passion with dedication and expertise for over 70 years. The Queen's genuine engagement with racing, her obvious knowledge and care for the horses, provided a masterclass in how to approach any field of endeavor with seriousness and respect. As the months passed after Royal Ascot 2022, the significance of the Queen's return and victory only grew in the public consciousness. The event became a touchstone for discussions about aging with dignity, the importance of maintaining passions throughout life, and the power of expertise developed over decades of dedicated study. The warm ovation she had received represented more than appreciation for a royal appearance. It was recognition of a life lived with purpose, dedication, and genuine care for others. The Queen's horse Reach for the Moon continued to race successfully, carrying the royal colors with distinction and serving as a living reminder of that perfect afternoon at Royal Ascot. Every subsequent appearance of the horse brought back memories of the day when sporting excellence and human emotion combined to create something that transcended ordinary experience and entered the realm of legend. The story of Queen Elizabeth II's return to Royal Ascot and the warm ovation she received became more than a sporting anecdote. It became a parable about the power of passion sustained over a lifetime, the importance of courage in the face of physical limitation, and the magic that can occur when someone who has dedicated their life to serving others is recognized and celebrated by those they have served. In the end, it was a perfect conclusion to one of the most remarkable partnerships between a monarch and a sport in the history of either institution.